The course, this half in particular, but the whole course, is designed to meet specific objectives that we're trying to accomplish for every student within the BJU core. So rather than me tell you what those are, I think it's going to be more productive for all of us in terms of engaging with where we're going to discuss for a bit, simple question to start the day here, what is meant by the word essential? This course was named Essential Science. So what does the word essential mean? What does essential mean?
Necessary.
Necessary, okay? And maybe let me follow up. Necessary in terms of?
Well, whatever it's referring to, so it's necessary for something.
Okay, like, so in some way, science that's necessary.
Yeah, for life, I would assume.
Okay, for life. That's helpful. Some other thoughts, because the word essential can mean lots of things. I mean, people use it on wardrobes, right? That you know, the well-dressed person has to have these items in his or her closet. So what's another meaning that may be helpful in illuminating the word essential as it's applied to the title of the course? Because that was an intentional decision.
Essence is part of essential, so it's capturing the whole idea of science, and essential in the idea that without it you'll fail or fail to understand.
Okay, that's helpful. He captured the word essence, the essence of science, that if you don't get this, you see, you'll fail. That sounds really... Fail in what sense? Even if you're successful in the course, which we hope you will be.
Well, fail to understand, I imagine.
Okay, so we're pointed toward understanding of some key ideas. Do you have your hand up too?
I was going to say it's just basic to a liberal arts education, to being a well-rounded person. It's the things you need to know to interact with the world at large.
Okay, basic to being a well-rounded person as part of a liberal arts education. And I think she added something key, so that you can interact productively, effectively with other people out there in the world. You've got a point of contact, and maybe you can mine a resource here that we're going to try and give you this semester. What else comes to mind here?
The bare minimum of something that you need to know.
Okay, and that's often the way this is used, the bare minimum. I won't break into a chorus of the bare necessities of life, but so, you know, boiling it down. So we have the essence, we have the bare minimum. By the way, you don't need to preface anything this semester by I'm not a science person, but, okay? Because this class is for you if you're not a science person. We're going to try and stretch you for reasons that I hope this discussion will pull to the surface, but this course is designed to interact with where you probably are at this point. So, bare minimum. What might be the negative educational implication of bare minimum? If what it really means is bare minimum, then your expectation is what? Got an idea?
I was just going to say that maybe you don't need to know anything else, so why would you keep studying science if you already know the bare minimum?
This is it. We've kind of captured the whole thing, and you know, in 7 weeks you can become a master, right? Sounds like an infomercial somewhere. So we got it. We got a way of encapsulating all the science you really need to know. Back here.
I would say it's kind of like macro science. It's very general and generic.
Okay, general and generic. Now, what would be the downside of that?
Not specific enough.
Yeah, not specific enough to actually be helpful, right? Like I encountered something, but we didn't deal with it in enough depth that it means anything to me, that it's memorable, that it's useful, right? And so there were some serious discussions about what goes into this course from that standpoint. A negative connotation maybe you're just too polite to say this, but the bare essentials would be dumbed down, right? Like you can't handle any more than this. So we'll dumb it down, lowest common denominator kind of thing. And either one of those, actually, the dumbed down version or the really general approach, is going to leave you like, I fulfilled a requirement. 7 weeks we were together, but I really don't remember much about what went on, and certainly not life-changing in any respect. Okay, following me so far? So what we've adopted that's particularly strong in this half of the course is an issues orientation. We're focused on issues. In fact, we're focused, in these 7 weeks, we're focused on 5 issues, okay, that are live issues, that are, people are pro and con about them, okay? The first one of them happens to be attempts to create life. Does that sound controversial? Okay. And you could, on the really macro level, say what about that as a Christian? You might not even need this course to say this.
Well, attempts to create life from a Christian worldview would be both wrong and impossible because God is the author of life, and therefore
Okay,
it's immoral.
so he says both wrong biblically and impossible since God is the author of life. Now, let's take that kind of reaction, probably shared by most of you, and let's say you're interfacing with somebody who doesn't have a biblical background at all. You imagine yourself sitting in the queue waiting for an airplane flight to load or next to somebody on the flight. How much traction does that have? Like somehow the discussion comes around to that.
It really doesn't have any traction because they don't have a biblical worldview.
Yeah, we're not coming at it from the same worldview at all. So what's likely to be their reaction if that's the way you respond? Maybe, I mean, periodically there's actually one this summer that could be, one of these things that was in the news and generate discussion, okay? That they actually produced an organism where they think they found the minimum number of genes. So they didn't actually create it from scratch, but they took out a whole bunch of genes and to see if the thing will still function, okay? And the goal is eventually, like, we've completely mastered this thing. We know exactly how many genes necessary to keep something alive. It's part of the process. So maybe the guy's coming from that perspective, okay? And your answer comes across as what?
Just like religion-based and faith-based, and doesn't really hold much in the science world.
Religion-based, faith-based, but not science-based. Right? Is there a stereotype about the way Christians would interact with these issues?
Yes, there is. And I think one reaction you could have is to challenge them ethically, because every person has a system of ethics, even if they're not necessarily religious.
Okay.
And is humanity in a place where they can take the responsibility of creating life?
Okay. So there's an ethical system, and she's pointing out you might challenge the responsibilities that go along with, okay, you're going to play God, so, what's your ethical system to judge how far this goes and what it gets used for? But I think even in that sense, although that's perfectly appropriate at some point in the discussion, if you had long enough, it's probably playing into a stereotype of Christians if we go there too early. I mean, what's the stereotype going to be?
The stereotype is just that Christians are like, oh, well, I believe the Bible and I don't care about the facts, or so-called facts. So we just ignore the science and like, well, this is what the Bible says, so that's what I believe, and I don't care what you say, is
Yeah.
typically.
Yeah, that I hear you, but God's authoritative, you're not. God said it, I believe it, that settles it, you've heard that, right? Theologically, there's nothing wrong with that. But does that have any traction with somebody who's unregenerated? No. Right? Like engage me, use the word facts, engage me on that level. I mean, that's where I'm coming from as a worldling, this person would say. You got your faith. I don't think I've got one, many of them would say. I don't think I'm operating from a faith system. You could probably help them with that if you had some time, but you'd have to demonstrate what? To have some time. I mean, people, not at 30,000 feet, but people often have options about whether the discussion will continue, right? They can check out. So what would keep them engaged? What would give you a chance for more substantial discussion?
Having facts that back your biblical worldview.
Okay, having facts that back up my biblical worldview. Like, yeah, I understand the same facts that you understand. Not like I'm ignorant of those things. I'm well aware of this. It's not like there's this dichotomy between faith and reason. Like my faith takes into account what you're saying, and it's not, maybe not every aspect of, I don't want to be Mr. Know-it-all. I heard all that, but I want to be a good listener, but at the end of the day, I want it to be apparent that my faith is not in spite of the facts, but my faith accounts for the facts. Right? Is that true? Okay? And so the stereotype that we're trying to break has to do with this idea of, I don't even engage in the factual, scientific side of things. I mean, that's not my game. My game is a faith game, and I believe no matter what you tell me. Right? On some level, again, that's true, isn't it? Right? But that's true of the secular perspective too, that there are facts they're ignoring, okay, or don't know what to do with. So this is not simple. But what we're talking about is not simple. Granted? Right? So, the structure of this course, we're doing a little bit this morning, but it's going to be a discussion-based course. Because you actually need to come away in 7 weeks if we accomplish our purposes with regard to biology with what? Talked about the essentials. 5 major issues are going to represent a whole lot more, right? That in engaging those, we're going to be able to do what? In other words, kind of making a promise here today. That if you will engage with the way the course is designed, what should you be able to do? This is day 1 syllabus stuff, isn't it? The student will be able to, and you can see what those are in the syllabus, but what would you expect if we're going to deliver? Say?
To be able to have discussions on these issues with people who not necessarily have a biblical worldview and not feel at a disadvantage and be able to share your faith and your views intelligibly.
Yeah, to be able to have one of these discussions. I call them redemptive conversations. Okay? To be able to have a redemptive conversation with somebody who does not share my worldview and be able to demonstrate the demeanor of being a good listener. Christians are often not very good listeners. Right? When you find yourself in that situation, it's almost like, okay, so I know what I'm supposed to do with this opportunity, and I'm just waiting until there's a break in the conversation for me to give this person the gospel, right? And maybe this is the appropriate time to share the gospel, but maybe this is cultivation. Maybe this is planting some seeds. Maybe it'd be too much to go in and close the sale, so to speak, right? But I can break a stereotype of Christians. I can say, I care about you as a person, enough to listen, enough to actually engage with what you're saying, enough to demonstrate a spirit of humility. right? What would you say about where we are in history with regard to people interacting with other people? I think this is a moment culturally, historically, that we could seize. But where are we right now in terms of interchange of ideas between people, especially in the U.S.? So that's a big picture question, right? That's bigger than science. Where are we at this moment?
Well, communication is happening very rapidly, almost instantly. So we're exchanging ideas almost instantly through the internet.
Okay, so we have rapid communication, unprecedented, right? Something happens on the other side of the world and we know about it in a minute or two sometimes. What else, though, where we have people who disagree with each other? What about interchange of ideas?
Everything is about tolerance, even if you don't agree, but
Okay.
you're not supposed to disagree with them like avidly or anything.
Yeah, we get this idea of tolerance, that there is no right answer to this question, right? I read an interview. This is not in People magazine, it's in The Week magazine, but an interview with the actor Will Smith, who was talking about how his marriage has lasted for 19 years. And he used this terminology. He said, you know, there's some uncomfortable moments in marriage, and you sit down with the other person, and she speaks her truth, and then you speak your truth. Really? Isn't there truth, period? You understand what I'm saying? So yeah, we are in that situation where people redefine what the word truth means. And we don't have these standards that says there's a right answer to this question. But what else is going on? And maybe we just put the specter of politics in there as a piece.
There's such thing as freedom of speech in the media and in the social...
Okay, a lot of emphasis on freedom of speech to say whatever you want, no matter how hurtful it is. Maybe because you're living in the moment. You know, I'm older by a good bit. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think we're in a period that's unprecedented for the way people interact with each other, particularly politically, but that's just the canary in the mine shaft for the way we treat other people. When we disagree, you know, theoretically there's this tolerance thing, and we're kind of coming out of that as a society and moving towards something very different. I mean, what's very different about where we are now?
I think we're becoming increasingly caustic toward Christianity, like as a society.
Yeah. Within your lifetime, there's this movement from tolerance to intolerance, particularly toward Christianity. We won't get into particular political candidates, but political candidates are actually interacting with each other in what sort of way? We talking about the merits of their position on issues? Is that where this campaign is mostly parked?
I think they're communicating in a way that's like attacking each other personally instead of really dealing with the issues that are at hand. And I think that goes for society as a whole. Like we're just turning to action, like sometimes violent action, instead of discussion.
Okay. So yeah, we're actually in a position where it seems to be perfectly fine to attack the other person. Not their views, but the person. Okay? The kind of verbiage that's used, this was in a national news magazine last week. Somebody writing on the election said, really, it's a choice between unhinged and unethical. What do you like better? Okay? And the candidates are treating each other that way. Talk shows put people in a situation where they expect them to attack each other. It's almost like the Roman circus on a verbal level, right? Like, go ahead and say something that will raise the temperature of this whole discussion, okay? That will give us what we came for here, right? So into that, we walk as Christians, and what should be the nature of our interaction in these redemptive conversations? Go for the jugular? The Bible have anything to say about what that interaction ought to look like? So we're saying we ought to be informed scientifically as well as biblically. Anybody know 1 Peter 3?
I'm taking a guess. Is it the one that says give an answer to all?
Yeah, absolutely is. That we're to be ready always to give an answer to everyone who asks you. You know what the next word is? Reason for the hope that's in you. Not just a declaration, that is my faith position, but a reason why that is my position. In other words, faith is not at odds with reason when reason is properly in submission to God. Anybody know how that verse finishes?
I was going to say the hope.
Okay, the hope that's within you. And hope in the Bible is what?
The gospel.
It's the gospel. It's a confident expectation, okay? So it's not a wishy-washy, well, you might disagree with this. This is God's truth, okay? But I'm giving a reason for the hope that's in me, why I'm confident about this. Anybody know how the verse finishes?
With meekness and fear.
With meekness and fear. That's to be our disposition. What does that say? What does that add to the conversation? So we've got a faith, and we're clear about that. We've got a reason for our faith that's appropriate in the context. We're not ignorant of the facts. But our interaction is with meekness and fear. What does that add?
We're being humble about it and not trying to get our point across and being dogmatic or anything.
Yeah.
But just trying to have meekness about it and not to lift ourselves up, but to lift up.
I'm not lifting myself up. I'm not being arrogant about this. Like, I've got the answer and you don't, kind of thing. Like, I wish you did. Right? I'd like to help you with this. It's not me. It's not my truth. It's not my force of intellect. I'm trying to give you something that I came to terms with, that God opened my eyes about. Right? The fear is the fear of God. You know, that ultimately I don't, through rhetorical gifts, I don't persuade other people. It's not ultimately up to me. But I do play a part in it. So we're talking about being prepared for those kinds of redemptive opportunity, conversation opportunities. Is that what you're here for? I hope so. I hope so. This is a strategic piece, as the whole BJU core is. But this is a strategic piece in the apologetics side of things. Because a lot of these discussions will be about what? These opportunities for discussion will be about? Well, some of them may be about politics, but a lot of them ultimately will be about science, right? Issues. Should we do this or shouldn't we? Right? And on what basis do we decide what we should and shouldn't do? So if that's our objective, President Pettit talked about this a bit the other night. Are you going to be able to memorize your way to that outcome? It's not going to happen. Right? True? Some of you look really pained to say that, but because most of us have been very successful educationally in memorizing our way to a particular endpoint that's acceptable to us. There's got to be personal ownership of the thinking. I mean, I've got to have internalized it, not as a script, but as something I'm persuaded about, and I'm able to think logically and reconstruct the path, right, to that conclusion. So that's what we're going to be working with. Okay, I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too.